Hey gang, welcome back for this week's episode of your favorite podcast, Ranching Reboot. I'm your host, Red Hills Rancher. Don't forget to like and follow me on social media. Check the episode description for all my links. You know, writing ads are one of the things that I find really difficult. If you hate listening to them as much as I hate writing them, please consider subscribing on Spotify for just $5 a month, and you won't have to listen to ads anymore. Speaking of ads, I actually don't really have a sponsor for this episode, besides the continuing support of my amazing Patreons on patreon.com/redhillsrancher. There's a Patreon link in the episode description. So let's talk about some of those links that are there. I'd really love it if you'd all take the time and click some links. These are companies that I like, and more importantly, products that I use. These companies and businesses support the podcast, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd show them some love. Last week, when Chad and I said that grass-fed beef will be a byproduct of the carbon sequestration industry, we're both pretty serious. If you want to know more, click the Grassroots Carbon link in the description. The Noble Research Institute has invited me to their Essentials of Regenerative Ranching course in Stillwater, Oklahoma, August 8th and 9th. There's a link for that as well if you'd like to know more. And if you're wondering where you can find info about those two events and just about every other soil health or regenerative ag event, click the Soil Health Events link in the description or on my link tree. That's it. That's all I got. Here we go. Hey, you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money. All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take your conversations with fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today. So you're in the background information that I was saying. You're on the Kiss the Ground board, and you co-own a restaurant with Woody Harrelson. So did you meet him before or after you got involved with Kiss the Ground?
Oh, way before. Woody and I think I was 13 when I met Woody. So he was in Hawaii, and my mom's identical twin sister lives rural off-grid farming bamboo in Hawaii. And I guess he wandered up her driveway looking to see if anybody had any weed. And and then I'm 45 and I was 13 then. So how you can do the math, how long we've been friends. His wife is dear friends with my mom's identical twin sister, and by extension, my mother. And so we have all been friendly for a long time. And he really believed in me when there was no vegan restaurants with like brewery or beer or bars. They were all just kind of like little sprout avocado little holes in the walls that nobody wanted to go to. He believed in a bigger, more glamorous vision for that. And that was, 12 or 13 years ago. And I've only been on, Kiss the Ground didn't exist back then. My brother was the founder of Kiss the Ground, and that happened in, 2014 or 15, something like that.
Oh, very cool. I know Woody Harrelson, he's been fairly outspoken. I don't follow show business or Hollywood or any of that stuff, but I know he's been a vegan for a while when he did that movie Zombieland, and he was supposed to eat a Twinkie. He kind of he had a thing they had to find or make a vegan Twinkie just for his character in that movie because of his beliefs. And if you're going to stick to your guns, stick to your guns. And I respect that. But it's interesting to hear that, that he has been involved in, or at least been thinking about food in a different context for that long. But what I really want to know is when he walked up the driveway back in the early 90s, did you hook him up with weed?
I would say that I was 13. So my selling weed days had not come upon me yet. But I suspect somebody on the farm hooked him up with something. But
Is this a neither confirm nor deny thing?
this is a neither confirm nor deny thing. But I would say that he has always been really mindful about food, and also about the environment, but not in a end of days fear mongering way, but more in a solution oriented way. And all of us are allowed to change our minds about stuff. And so I started by having vegan restaurants because I thought I actually did think that was the way forward for food and humanity. And I was misguided. And that misguided, I learned it from Graham Sate, from a TED talk someone sent me. And I thought, wow, I'm completely off base. And that's how, and I grew up on a farm. But we were always vegetarians. My dad grew apples and vegetables. And so we always had animals for inputs, but we didn't eat them. And so I was just raised that way. And my parents were hippies, and that was kind of their thing. But our whole family has shifted. My mom and me are still vegetarians. I think we're the only ones. But we all recognize that animal agriculture with good stewardship is the way forward. And that is why I, had these restaurants and realized that food in the landfill was far more detrimental than any cow farts that people want to complain about. And so I realized that I was actually part of the problem and not part of the solution. And that's when I purchased Engelhart Farm, and we started keeping all the scraps from the restaurants, composting them, mixing them with cow manure. And now it's been 5.5 years, and we haven't bought any inputs in 3.5 years. And we're producing about $650,000 worth of produce a year with zero vegetables. Like, it's regenerative farming with vegetables is really hard. But we haven't bought any inputs in over 3 years, with the exception of hay, because land in California is very expensive. I don't have enough grazing. So we buy hay, but that's the only input that I've bought.
The question that probably a lot of people are going to want to know is, after so many years, what are your yields like for your crops compared to neighboring conventional operations?
Oh, it's crazy. I bought a property down the street from me and flipped it, actually, and it was only 17 acres, and it was avocados in the front, 7 acres, and oranges in the back. And so I got all the records with it. And so they were using double the water that I was using, and they were producing about between $35,000 a year and $75,000 a year, depending on the avocados. If they were avocados have a good year and a bad year, basically, because the fruit stays on for so long. When they're flowering, the plant only has so much energy to make new fruit when it's a heavy year, because they're still holding last year's fruit when the flowers come. Anyway, so we're talking about 10x, and I use half the water and 10x the produce. So it's crazy. But the problem is the labor. We're still not profitable because unlike operations where you're grazing and it can be a lower labor, lower inputs, when you're growing vegetables and you're trying not to use plastic, and you're not tilling, and you're not using chemicals to get rid of the weeds. It's labor. It's labor that kills us. But I don't see a path forward where humans don't eat vegetables. So I do want to crack the code for regenerative farming for vegetables. And I do think it's in the food forest paradigm. And that's, we have rows and rows of orchard trees, and we grow all our row crops in the 15 to 20 foot aisleways. And I can send some photos if you want to show your listeners what I'm talking about. But basically, we're growing corn between lemon trees, or we're growing cabbage between avocado trees. And even we found we had lost 1,000 avocado trees the first year we were here, because the heat over 120 degrees for multiple days in a row. Now, when we plant young trees, a new orchard planting, we plant corn, and the corn actually protects the trees the first 2 seasons, and it aspirates the moisture and creates basically swamp cooler, air conditioner plant matter between these rows. So when you do have a hot day, you're getting short amount of sun and lots of moisture being aspirated from the tall corn stalks. And so we do think that a lot of what we're learning in this grand experiment of vegetable farming as a regenerative farmer can be valuable for other people moving forward.
I agree. I was just sitting here, I was listening to you and thinking about, I just finished a book called 1491. And I can't even remember the author, but it's about, it kind of goes into pre-Columbian Americas, South America, Mesoamerica, and a little bit into North America. They don't necessarily talk about the plain states because by the time anybody got here to explore the plain states, smallpox had already wiped out, 90 to 95% of the people. But there's good accounts of, South American civilizations in Peru, Mesoamerican civilizations, Mexico, Ecuador area, and Native American civilizations up and down the East Coast. And it's really fascinating to, to I say read, but I didn't read it. I listened to it in an audiobook, but it's really fascinating. It's really fascinating to hear about, some of the accounts about how the natives, I can't even say manipulated their environment, but it sounds like there was a lot of wholesale terraforming that happened in South America and Peru and Ecuador and Brazil and even up into Mexico. And something else I learned from that book that I didn't know. I knew potatoes were originated in South America.
Right.
Tomatoes. I didn't know tomatoes came from or were native to the Americas and were imported to Europe. Beans and squash. I mean, squash. Yeah. Okay, I kind of knew that one, but I guess I really didn't realize so many beans were domesticated by pre-Columbian cultures in South America.
We're moving to Bandera, Texas. We're leaving California and we're moving to Bandera, Texas. And there's a small museum there that has a exhibit right now about before it was Mexico, like 1500s, when it was called New Spain, and the trade routes between Asia, and about a lot of the things that we consider Asian food. A lot of the chilies and all that stuff actually came from the Americas, specifically what we now call Mexico. At the time was called New Spain. And it's heavily religious, the exhibit, but there's a bunch of stuff about food, but there's also kind of these Asian versions of Christ, all these big sculptures of an Asian Christ. And it's very interesting to see. And they have a replica of the ships that were trading during that time and what the main things that they were bringing back and forth was. And they talk about the Asian influence in New Spain. And my husband is indigenous from the Oaxaca region of Mexico, and was very isolated. The road didn't get to his village till 1991. So wow. His father doesn't drive a car to this day. He only drives a horse or rides a horse. And so if you think about
your husband got a road to his town the same year you met Woody Harrelson looking for weed in Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just for context. Yes.
Just did that math real quick.
So that's that. So I don't know, but if you look at how my husband looks, there's a lot of Asian, like the eyes and all of that. And so my husband was like, well, I wonder like how much of this trading there was people coming back and forth as well. And then how much of that, and we're not going to submit our DNA to 23andMe to find out, but
I'm not either
I'm not interested in anybody owning my genetic makeup. But it was interesting conversation. It was cool to take the kids and have them think about, well, spicy, when you go to a Chinese restaurant and there's spicy food, did those chilies really come from where daddy was born? And, it was interesting to look at that. But there is a lot of
why is rice such a staple in Mexican food? Rice isn't native to this continent.
I think, was it from then? Well, no, but they don't even grow rice in Mexico.
No. But why is there
I,
such a thing as Spanish rice? And why when you go to a Mexican restaurant, it's always rice and beans?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think that we probably started buying something from them that we wanted, and we started importing cheap rice from China at some point to make up for what we were taking out. I'm not sure what it was, but generally that's how rice gets places. Is
Yeah,
because we like rice is in like where quinoa grows. Now all those people are eating rice because a bunch of hippies in California want to eat quinoa with their kale in every meal. Is that really, or should we be eating brown rice that grows in Sacramento rather than quinoa from the certain agricultural level of the planet? It's like a very small, has to be a certain height, has to be a certain depth from the equator. Like quinoa doesn't grow everywhere, and why we have to eat it with every meal in California is confusing to me.
well, I mean, if California is that confusing, I guess you can always go to Texas.
I am. I'm
Why are
fortunate.
you leaving California?
Um, I feel a little bit like a political refugee. I always say I'm a radical centrist. Um, and I'm joking because there's nothing radical about being centrist, but if everybody's going to be the radical left and the radical right. But I've worked for 13 years every day running my restaurants. And during the pandemic, the powers that be chose to shut us down for years. And I was in a I was in a contract for $31 million to sell my restaurants and expand over the United States in 2019, 2020, early 2020. We were in the due diligence period doing all the work. And then the world got shut down. And when I say the world, I mean the blue world got shut down. And um, now my restaurants are, are hobbling along and doing okay, but it's not, there's nothing to sell. There's nothing there. And I feel like I worked really, really hard to build something that made a difference for the planet, that had this whole food loop, that was taking care of the supply chain, taking care of my employees, everything that California says that they care about. And literally they destroyed it without any care or consideration. And they continue to do whatever they want. And the small business is, and the farmer is not at the legislative table at all. And I don't see how I can just keep paying into a system that I can't get behind. And, I walk outside of my restaurant and we clean up feces every day in the like outdoor patio area because it's a private place at nighttime for people to use the restroom. People come into my restaurant on Mother's Day and got naked and got on all fours and screamed things you can't imagine to 3 generations of women at a table. And the police didn't come, and they sent a social worker to deal with the distraught unhoused person. And I'm not saying that the unhoused person doesn't deserve a social worker, but I'm saying that in the immediate, the police need to come and break up the situation, and my staff is getting spit on. I mean, it's just crazy. It's
It's a
crazy, crazy.
disruption to your business. It's a disruption to it's uncomfortable for your customers. It's a crappy situation for your staff to have to deal with. Yeah,
And it's not just that, it's the farm. I'm in 10 different county or 14 different county violations, code compliance issues that are, to anywhere else in the world, a farm would not be. I needed more cooler space, and so I converted a tough shed, not a tough shed, but one of those companies, like a shed,
right.
into a walk-in cooler with a cool bot. I don't know if you've ever seen a cool bot. They're awesome. You can turn a window AC into a refrigerator. But I did it all code compliant, like with the FRP on the walls, diamond plate on the floors, everything, the light, UV light for bacteria, everything compliant. And they said that I can buy a walk-in cooler, or I could have a shed, but I can't have a shed that is a walk-in cooler. It needs to be demoed and removed. That's just one of 14 violations. But the main violation is they won't let any ag workers live on the farm, and only one ag worker for every 40 acres in agriculture. But that model only works for big monocrop ag. That doesn't work for other types of ag. It doesn't work for a market garden. It doesn't work for, I mean, we're growing 300 different species of stuff on the farm. We have a vineyard, we have a hop yard. I mean, that doesn't work for us. And people are then screaming equity everywhere and that people need to share. And then when people are living, I live with 27 people on my ranch and we live in harmony. We eat off the land. We have the cows. We get, the cows get milked every morning. Like there's orange juice, fresh orange juice off the trees. Like everybody gets to eat. Everybody works here. Everybody gets a paycheck. And that's not allowed. But they told me that if I moved the tiny houses out to the street and they were disconnected from septic and power, then they would be considered unhoused and there was nothing they could do about it. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. If I put them in an unsanitary, unsafe and situation, then we're just going to look the other way. But as long as they're hooked up to power, water, and septic, it's illegal. I mean, you can't wrap your head around this stuff. If my compost pile is more than 6 feet tall, they will come and give me a fine because I could start a fire.
You can't make this up.
No, I just got one of my other violations. They want engineering on the animal structures. So if you imagine we're in an oil drilling part of the world. And so I have a lot of oil pipes. So there's like oil pipes welded and then sheet metal or wood with sheet metal, 2 walls, 3 walls, different versions for shade for goats, sheep, cows. They want engineering on this. I can't get you engineering on it, so it needs to be torn down. But I can't tear it down because the animal county control would then say there's no shade. And I wouldn't want to have my animals here with no shade. Forget animal county control. But do you see what I'm saying? Like that level of micromanaging, it feels invasive.
Well, you're not in compliance. We're not going to help you get to compliance. We're not going to tell you the path that you should have taken to get to compliance. We're just going to tell you you're out of compliance and you have to deal with it or you're going to pay a fine. I almost don't know what to say. Like that just sounds like a bureaucratic legal nightmare of a place to even try to do business in. No wonder you're leaving.
And I've been very successful at doing business here for a long time. But if my businesses were still thriving, maybe I would tough it out. But I'm not going to stay here, pay the 14% income tax, pay the property taxes, and not be able to make a living and not be able to send my children to school because I didn't choose to give them specific medications that the government feels is necessary for them to be educated. So I am homeschooling. It just seems like too much to live here. And
Are you talking about vaccinations?
Yeah, there's zero exemptions for any vaccinations in California. There's no religious, there's no personal belief exemptions. There's zero exemptions.
If the state says that there's a vaccine, you've got to take it.
And there's 52 that the state says need to be 52 injections. Some of them are repeats.
Okay.
But you can't be a regenerative farmer and look at what the magic of soil, the magic of microbiology, and not also know that our body is a miracle in the same way and has that same magic, and that like what you put into it is going to make a difference. And you can't, or you can. I'm sure there's lots of regenerative farmers that don't see it this way. But in my opinion, I look at the miracle of the soil. I look at what we did in just 3 years here, from like desert, rocks, sand, glyphosate, no water infiltration, to 18 inches of deep black soil and no inputs for 3 years. We did that in a short amount of time. And I guess the real problem is I did it in California.
Okay.
So now I got to start over.
Well, it's not starting over. It's an opportunity to try again and do better.
Yeah. Okay. That's one way to put it.
One of the things I like to say a lot is shake the hand that feeds you. And I love to point out that it's extremely applicable to people that want to eat an alternative. I say alternative, want to eat the way they want to eat, whether it's carnivore, whether you want to be vegetarian, or whether you want to be a vegan. I fully support that choice on one condition. You make an effort to shake the hand that feeds you. And I love what you're doing. Like you're trying to grow food, have a restaurant, have a place to sell it. And I think that's a great model because and I think what am I trying to say here? It's like with beef. Okay. You can either play the wholesale commodity game and take a few pennies and be content with the price you're offered, or you can control the supply chain from growing to customer. I mean, whether we're talking about cattle from breeding from sperm to steak, or we're talking about avocado trees from seed to fruit, it's important. It's important to know where your food came from, how it was grown, who grew it, that they have good working conditions, that they have good living conditions. And more importantly, it's forging that connection between the consumer and the producer. Okay. And keeping that close, keeping that local. And one of the things, I think it was Kate Kavanaugh a few episodes ago, she has the term flavor of place.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I thought you might. Um, so the reason I came up with that phrase, shake the hand that feeds you, it's simple, it's elegant, it works for everybody, no matter what dietary choice. And it starts, if you think about it, it'll start someone thinking down a path of, okay, well, where is my food come from?
Yeah. And I mean, I always say, I don't care what you eat as long as you're eating awake. And I mean that by saying sort of similar to what you say, like, you can't just eat asleep and not have any sense of where your food is coming from and where, because I don't care how healthy you are, if you're on some weird banana diet and all you eat is bananas from South America or Mexico or whatever, like that's not a sustainable. I was arguing with a dear friend of mine that lives in Chicago that's a fruitarian, as to, because he's, up against this struggling with that maybe veganism isn't the right way. And he called me, and I won't say his name, but because he's kind of made his whole career on being kind of a famous vegan. And so I said, well, my question is, if the supply chain went down and you live in Chicago, could you be a fruitarian? No. So like you have two choices. You can be a fruitarian on a very skinny stripe around the entire equator. And you should move to one of those places if you want to be a fruitarian. But it is not reasonable to be a fruitarian. It is actually completely self-centered and taking up way more resources than necessary for you to get all the calories for. And yes, he looks 20 years younger than he is. He's got a six pack. Like I get all that stuff. Like metabolically, it's working for him, but it doesn't work for the whole. And we're all one single cell in the whole. And so I'm always trying to encourage people to eat where you are. And then we need to make these hub and spoke models that can be connected. And so we can trade food to different areas or purchase food from different areas. But the base of your diet wants to be regional. And I have a CSA or a box program. It's not really a CSA because they don't pay it up front. They just pay every week, and get it delivered to their house. It's really like a veggie box program to your house. But anyways, we have this box, and you don't know how many times people cancel, like, oh, I'm just, it's like you stopped having cabbage and broccoli, and my kids only eat cabbage or my kids only eat broccoli or whatever. And I understand having picky kids, but like also I can't grow broccoli in 100 degrees outside. And so can you enjoy tomatoes, cucumbers, Swiss chard, and I don't know, squash and zucchini. I got tons of zucchini, eggplants. Can you enjoy those foods this time of year? And then enjoy the brassicas when it's cold out. We're blessed enough here in California that you can actually eat locally year round, but people, they just don't have that mindset to want to. And during the pandemic, the farm was doing really great and we were selling a lot of boxes. And as soon as people were not afraid of Whole Foods anymore, then they stopped buying my boxes. And I was so disappointed because I thought, oh, wow, this is catching on. People care about the conditions in which the people that are working, the conditions in which the animals that are part of the inputs, the conditions, all that, and the forever chemicals and how we're treating our water and everything. I thought people cared about it. And literally they didn't. They only cared. They were literally scared of touching the pin pad at Whole Foods. And I I was so disappointed by that. Our box sales went from 250 to 300 a week, and now we're down below 100 a week. And
And those
it's
same people will go out and protest Jeff Bezos launching rockets.
yes.
Like, you got to figure this one out, people.
It's very, people are very disconnected from their food, and I don't, and that's why the project we're doing in Texas, I'm hoping is going to make a difference in that way. It's like 30 tiny houses. It's a hospitality. We're having an on-farm brewery, on-farm restaurant, and 30 places to stay. And my hope is that people can come and like get connected and remember to, okay, I should be buying locally. And these are the questions I should be asking my farmers when I go buy locally. And I should get a meat box from, even if it's not locally delivered, from somebody that I trust and care about. And I have all the certifications, and I honestly, I hate them. I think that we need to go back to a system where I buy my meat from you because I trust you. And I know that you're not going to put anything in my meat that you wouldn't put in your own children's mouth. And that's what I want to get back to. Everybody relies so heavily on these regenerative certified, organic certified, Demeter certified, but we have to trust each other, and we have to. And it's crazy because people trust like eating almost anything from the grocery store that has forever chemicals, PFAs. I mean, we found out that Roundup, of all the food on the market, Cheerios has the highest level of Roundup, followed by Ritz crackers. What are the first kit foods that we'd feed our children?
Oh, Cheerios. Got to give them
Cheerios.
Cheerios. They're easy. They're fun. They're easy to hold on to. Kids love them.
Kids love them. And the reality is that we trust this stuff that comes in these very sterile packages from Target or wherever, but we don't make an effort to trust our farmers. And I think there's like 4 or 5 simple questions you can ask a farmer to know whether you want to eat the food that they're growing or not. And it's very simple, but also we can't expect farmers to make the shift. Look, I'm out here spending all this money trying to make this happen, and no, I'm 45 minutes from Los Angeles and I can't sell more than 100 boxes a week. That's crazy, because you would think that that's the market that cares about it. And it's not that I don't have good branding or social media or presence or anything. Like, I'm all of that stuff. And still, the reality is people have traded resilience for convenience in such a way that I'm not sure how to make people go back.
There isn't a go back. I don't think there is a go back. I think that it's going to take what I've been thinking about, the trust and the convenience. And I also made a note, food looks pretty, pretty packaging claims, 21 essential minerals and vitamins, 18 grams of protein. Look at this bright yellow package with red letters on it. They spend millions upon millions of dollars to figure out the exact shade of yellow, the exact shade of red that's going to induce hunger, or going to make your eyeballs light up and look at that package and read their claim. And it's a convenience. That would be my interpretation of why the surge of customers you got in 2020 started to leave as soon as Whole Foods opened up again. They want that convenience. They want the convenience of being able to get things out of season, even if they're not local. And, there's a strong argument to be made about seasonality of diets and when things, should be, when things were traditionally consumed, because that's when they were in season and that's when they were available. We've been so spoiled by being able to get strawberries in February. Like I remember as a little
And
kid,
here, strawberries are in season in February. I mean, in California, but yes, they're not.
I get that. I get that. I remember when I was little, we went to the grocery store. I was probably like 4 or 5. So this is early 80s. I went to the grocery store with my mom, and my parents had a garden here. So there were strawberries here. We had fresh garden strawberries. And we went to the store and I walked by the strawberries. I'm like, Mom, let's get some strawberries. We don't have any at home. Let's get some strawberries. She's like, no, we'll have it. Well, ours will be here in another couple of months. Don't worry about it. Ours will be here in another couple of months. No, let's get some now. She says, no, we're not buying those because those are imported and those don't have any taste. Okay. We didn't buy the strawberries. And I think about, I, I just have trouble squaring seasonality of food with the way people want to eat. I mean, there's some things that, yeah, okay, it's not a bad idea. We can eat that all year. We invented bread. We made bread from grain so we could store the goodness of the grain for longer, right?
We had a root cellar. I grew up in upstate New York on a farm, a small apple orchard, and it was like 28 acres or something. And we had a huge vegetable garden and we had a root cellar and we put all the roots into the cellar. And those were the vegetables. We were vegetarians in upstate New York. And I mean, there wasn't tons of vegetables even at the grocery store back then in the wintertime. You could get celery, you could get iceberg lettuce, and then, the winter squashes and stuff and carrots. Like that was like the vegetables at the store back then.
Cold season vegetables, stuff you
Yeah.
put in soup or stew. And
Yes.
it makes
Potatoes.
perfect sense.
Yeah, no. And you'd maybe get broccoli that was coming from California or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But people are not committed to that. People are like, oh, I don't eat nightshades. Well, okay, so what are you going to eat all summer? I don't know what to tell you. Like that's when the nightshades grow in the summertime. And
yeah, and you get brassicas in the cool seasons and corn in the fall. There's all kinds of stuff that we're just used to having all year and fresh all year. But the problem is these things don't taste like anything.
and and there's an impact. Like what I always ask my kids, like, well, what is the real cost of that? We think it's $5, but there's a styrofoam. My daughter loves corn on the cob. And so it's like she always wants us to buy it's organic, but it's like wrapped in plastic in a styrofoam tray. And occasionally I let her get it, but it's also like, what is the real cost of that? That styrofoam thing is going to be here forever. That plastic is here forever. And we ate those 4 pieces of corn. And I know even why it's being sold like that, because it's hard to grow organic corn without getting worm in the top. So they're all chopped off and they sold in that thing so that they're only this much of it. So it doesn't matter that they had worm in the top of them. And as a farmer, I understand that. I respect why they started selling corn like that. But
I'd rather have a worm in my corn than it be soaked in a bunch of pesticide and herbicide and fungicide. Like,
oh yeah, for sure, 100%. There's a video of me on my Instagram where I'm like, I love my worms. They're kind of like pets. You got to feed them, and I go show everybody my 50-foot worm bin. But I love worms. But I don't love corn worms. But there's nothing really to be done about them.
I was just having a conversation with my dad yesterday about plastics, like in almost the same context. I grew up, my dad was pretty frugal. I mean, he's a guy he'll wash a Ziploc bag and reuse it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Seems a little weird. His parents
I wash Ziploc bags. I mean, we freeze a lot of strawberries and blackberries and mulberries, and then I make smoothies for the kids, and then I feel like I'm just going to use it to freeze berries again. I do wash them.
That's fine. I don't think it's weird. I don't think it's weird at all. And here's why. Because just like you said, it's one of those hidden costs. Okay, you'll go to the store and buy a box of Ziploc bags for $5, 10 cents a bag. Big deal. But we don't think about what's behind that plastic bag. There's an oil well or two. There's a guy checking the oil well. There's a guy hauling the oil. There's people at the refinery. There's transportation of the chemical plant. There's workers at the chemical plant, transportation to the plastic factory, workers at the plastic factory, transportation to the bag making factory. And it goes on and on and on and on and on for an item that most people, I'm not even going to say 99%. I mean, I just met somebody else that washes plastic bags. So there's more than one of you in the world. Most people are going to use that thing one time and throw it away. Like,
I know it's crazy, but it's in, oh, well, I'm buying it in glass, so that's better. But I mean, there's a cost to all of it. And my husband gets so frustrated because I'm constantly saving little jars. And he's like, we get pallets of jars that you make jam, because we have a whole line of canned like pickles and all that stuff. He's like, we get pallets of jars. Why are you saving all these jars? And I'm like, well, you never know. I could need it for some seeds or some this or that. And he's like, gets so frustrated. But I think about that. They took sand out of the ocean, they fired it up, they burned it into this jar, they made a top that came out of some mine and made it into this perfectly designed container, and then people just throw it away after one use. It seems crazy.
exactly. And the amount of energy that it takes to make the plastic bag, it's not much. But just the simple concept of we're throwing away, of how much plastic are we throwing away, and that all comes from petroleum. And i'm I'm not against petroleum, I'm not against oil. We need it. We also need to be trying to use less and be more efficient and transit and try to find another source of energy. Not arguing that. But the waste in our society, earlier you mentioned food waste. I mean, what? And you run restaurants. You run restaurants and a farm. And I know
Yeah.
your food waste is probably significantly less than the figure I'm about ready to say. And the statistic is 40%. Like 40% of the food that is grown is wasted. It's not eaten, or it goes rotten, gets spoiled, and ends up being discarded.
Me and I have a big adopted son. He's 21. And we were just talking about this yesterday because he was trying to make a video about it. And I bet it's higher than that. And not mine personally. I'm just saying overall. I'm just thinking, I'm at the farm. Every romaine head of lettuce, let's say, you take off almost half of it and goes back to the compost. Every thing of celery, you're cutting this much off the top and going back to the earth. So I heard that it was 30% from the consumer end, and I'm saying it's got to be about 30% on the farm end. I don't know on vegetables. I don't know what it is on meat. I don't know. I mean, I know here it's like, not even if my husband has an animal processed, they don't even want to let him keep the inside parts. And he has to like make a deal on the side with the guys that work in the back
To get the entrails and offal back.
Yeah. And
You,
and the head and the tongue
what do
and
you do with
not the
that?
tongue. The tongue isn't what?
What do you do with that stuff?
Oh, well, my husband makes tacos de cabeza with the head. This is very popular in Mexican culture. And so where you boil the head with onions and chiles and salt and oregano and other spices. And then once it's all cooked, you pull the whole head out. And it, as a vegetarian, it's not that appealing to me. And they put it on a thing, and then they make, pico de gallo and all the different salsas, and then warm tortillas, and people just pull pieces that they like, the cheek, the this, the that, and then put all the toppings and eat their tacos. This is a celebratory thing, like Christmas, like, this is a big fun thing, tacos de cabeza in his culture.
Celebrating the harvest of the animal.
Yeah. And so it's like reminds him of childhood. It reminds him of, how he lived as a child. And then the entrails, they clean them all out with cal or lime, not lime, and then they make it into menudo.
So it doesn't get wasted.
Well, no, and it shouldn't get wasted. And I mean, the liver he cuts up and just eats a little piece every day, and the heart. I mean, they have a thing to do with everything. My husband and my big son they don't want any bit of it to go to waste. And I mean, the last cow. I mean, the last cow that my husband had harvested. I mean, he pulled it from. I remember it was born on Halloween. He pulled it from the mother, took his shirt off, and like it was choking, took his shirt off and cleared everything out of its mouth and wiped it all down. And, and so my husband loves deeply the animals. And this is very hard for my constituents or my customers of the vegan community to understand, but it's just not one way that can love animals, to be honest. And I know that's hard for them to understand, but my husband loves his animals deeply and cares for them deeply, and he eats meat. And it would be crazy for me to say, oh, well, we're 100%, nothing on this farm was ever going to die because I don't eat meat. And then have him go to Vaughn's and buy meat that's been dipped in bleach from God knows where and still says organic on it, but it's dipped in bleach. Like that would be crazy pants. So I always tell people everybody's path for food is perfect for them. And as long as people are listening to their body and they're eating consciously, mindfully, and connected to where their food is coming from, that is their divine path around food. And just like what I think about pharmaceuticals, there's not one prescription for everybody. There's not one diet for everybody. And the idea that there would be or could be is crazy. And people talk about, oh, we're going to have, if everybody ate vegan, there's like, I'm struggling so hard to do a regenerative farm growing vegetables. It is very, very, very hard to do good for the soil and extract as much as we're extracting. And we're doing it. I mean, the numbers in our soil is showing it. Our water infiltration is crazy. Like we are doing it, but it takes something. And so the idea that we could do good for the planet and everybody only ate vegetables is crazy. And it's okay for me to only eat vegetables and dairy because I have dairy cows and I grow all my vegetables. And so I'm not having some huge expectation of taking more than I'm giving. But it is crazy for people to think that everybody could only eat vegetables. People are talking about, oh, this, and you could put all this stuff into a printer and print meat and all these fake meats that are coming out with all this GMO crap in them. A cow can eat grass and turn it into multiple forms of incredible protein. And whether you choose to partake or not is fine. But there is nothing bovine on pasture. There's nothing more beautiful than that, as long as you move them from that pasture to another pasture and another pasture and another pasture. There's nothing more beautiful than that. Bovine on pasture is the path forward. And people want to scream about carbon in the atmosphere because they want to sell electric cars and they want to sell solar panels. But if we really cared about that, we would be highly dedicated to bovine on pasture. We are bringing rain back to the desert. We are creating soil health that is unbelievable. I mean, even in Texas where we are, I didn't see a single dung beetle. I didn't see nothing. We dug the holes and planted a bunch of pecan trees when we got there and 1,500 fruit trees. And I didn't see a single forget microbiology. I didn't see any macrobiology. I didn't see a potato bug. I didn't see an earthworm. I didn't see nothing. And in just 1 year I'm running 2 farms on 2 different states. I'm not putting that much energy there in Texas, but just 1 year of running chickens in the orchard, running some cows on the pastures, having some, a few sheep. There's dung beetles everywhere. The soil, by putting mulch, just chipping the cedars and putting the cedars down and letting them do what the cedars are there for a reason. People are saying it's invasive. Well, no, they're a species that comes in to prepare the soil for the next species. Their acid is trying to take that alkaline soil and make it not white, make it black the way it's supposed to be. And so just by chipping cedars and putting it on that alkaline caliche soil, you can't believe in a year, all of a sudden we have black soil, maybe only this much, but give me a couple more years and we'll have more. And it's not, we have the power in our diets to make the shift, but it's not about printed food in a 3D printer. It's about, like you said, shaking the hand of the person that's making your food, and whatever that looks like. If you're eating vegetables, then eat from a local farm and know your farmer and eat seasonally. And you want to be vegan, great, do that. I'm all for it. If you want to eat only a carnivore diet where you're on the keto thing, then eat nose to tail and support a local farmer that's doing the right thing. And if it's not a local farmer, support a farmer that's in a state that it's making a difference for them to be farming in that state. And that's really simple. And don't get bamboozled by the grass fed. Grass fed means nothing. Every cow is grass fed until it's grain finished. Like,
That's right.
Who's grain starting a cow? Like, I don't even know what that means. It's like saying milk fed. Like, yes, every single cow was milk fed, whether it got to suck on its mother's chi-chi or not, I don't know. But they were all milk fed at some point.
Yeah, I mean, point taken. And that's why I'm not trying, like, the meat that I'm trying to sell, I'm not trying to sell it as grass fed. I'm trying to sell it as pasture finished on native range, because that's a claim. That's a claim that can't, that, somebody that's raising Angus in a feedlot feeding it corn silage, which is technically grass fed. Okay. They can make that claim. They can't say that they were pasture finished on native range. I can. So,
right.
And we're talking about manufactured food. And it's, for some reason, I was thinking about, there's people that are vegan because they're against animal cruelty. Okay. You want manufactured chicken nuggets and lab grown beef because you're against animal cruelty and factory farms. Well, let's just back up here for a second. There's a lot of chemicals that are needed to make lab grown food. And like one of the processes to make lab grown meat requires bovine growth serum. Okay. Where do you get bovine growth serum? You get it from pregnant cows at the slaughterhouse. That's where you get it. So, okay, we're going to make this fake lab meat. And that's what we're going to go buy because we don't like animal agriculture and it's cruel to animals. We're going to feel good about eating that, but it can only be made by killing pregnant cows. Yeah. You're saving the environment. You're doing those animals a big favor, buddy. Appreciate that.
That's so crazy. And it's not even just that. It's that what they're calling like the super cells that are fast growing. What is a forever cell, a fast growing cell, an immortal cell? Those are other names for cancer. So we're taking this bovine growth serum from pregnant cows, and then we're taking cancer cells, and we're taking some cow cells, and then we're growing that into some kind of Frankenstein meat, and then people are going to feel good about it. I have never, and I have never eaten an Impossible Burger. I have never eaten like a what
Beyond
meat. I have eaten like a veggie burger, like a patty of beans and rice and whatever. I'm not gonna say I haven't eaten those in my life, but I've eaten tofu, which is a cultural food from Asia, but I have never eaten any of these fake like chicken nugget, Morningstar, and any of those things. Like, I've never been attracted to that. Like, it doesn't resonate with anything about it. It's like this much ingredients, and I just don't want it. And I look at the back of a package, and I can't imagine that food growing. I can't see what that looks like growing in my head. I don't want to eat it. I'm sorry. Like, it's very simple. And if you were to walk around my farm, you'd see we have 300 olive trees because we can get 55 gallons of olive oil a year. So we have olive oil because I don't want to eat seed oils. And we have, a vineyard, and we have our wine, and we have persimmons trees. And I make several hundred gallons of persimmons vinegar every year. I believe that the highest quality food is the simple and old way of making it. And I know you're saying there's no going back, and I agree. But I also see those studies where all those studies that just came out about Amish children. Not one, there's 0 cases of Amish children having cancer before 18, 0 cases of autism. I mean, this is pretty compelling evidence that we are not going the right way when we're 1 in 33 children with autism.
I agree with you. And simple old ways of doing things, simple old ways of preserving and storing food, preparing food is what we need to go back to. And when I said there's no going back, what I think maybe more what I meant was it's not, the ship doesn't change course, right? It either sinks or it crashes. And then the survivors have an opportunity to build something different and try again. And I think that's where I feel like that's where we're headed, is like there's a large part of the existing system that's going to come down, that's going to stop working and stop being supported. And there'll be a period of confusion and chaos while the next thing is organizing itself. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, my mother, my whole life has said, we just need to tear it all down. And I always thought she was kind of crazy, to be honest. And more recently, I realized she was right about a lot of things. She was right. She worked at a natural food co-op when I was a child. She worked at a organic bakery as a child, and just to help us have the higher quality food that we couldn't afford. She really did see into the future. And we grew up vegetarian, and she wanted us to be vegan. And one time she put margarine in the oven to make it melt to make cookies, and it melted into like some kind of plastic. Basically, she forgot it in the oven and it turned into plastic. And she said, we're never eating margarine again. So I always told people, oh, we grew up vegan, but with butter. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, my mom wasn't into eating animals, but she wasn't into eating seed oils either. So we ate all vegetables and grains and a lot of butter. But my mom had, she had some insights. She was 19 when she had us. I don't know where she got it, but she's always been kind of like, she was the cell phones, or the radiation from the cell phone is going to hurt people. And I was like, she's crazy. But 5G, they're rolling it out. It's not going to be healthy. And you know what? She's been right about a lot of things. She was way in advance ahead of. And I actually feel really grateful that I got to grow up in that kind of rebel household. And hear that, and not just have the trust for the government and trust, because it's really like we, the people, have been asleep at the wheel, and what's going on, I feel like it does have to crash, because the federal government is only supposed to be limited. It's supposed to be a small thing. And it's the largest institution in the world. It's the largest employer in the world. But clearly it states in the Constitution, and we, the people, were supposed to keep that at bay, that they aren't supposed to get that big, that large, and that powerful. And so we've come to a world where everything is owned by the same people, and it's all controlled.
It's a big club, and we're not in it.
It's a big club, and we're not in it. And I always say, people say, well, you don't believe in climate change. No, I'm not saying I don't believe in climate change. What I'm saying is that if we were really committed to shifting the climate, then regenerative agriculture would be at the top of what we're doing, because it's scientifically working. I did it myself. I can show anybody, like, it's working. And it's not even, it's like, we just got we got Will Harris to speak and Gabe Brown at this committee, earlier this year. That's the first congressional hearing about regenerative agriculture. And we just kissed the ground, spent a lot of money, a lot of energy to just get that one hearing. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't sell anything. Regenerative agriculture cannot sell a Tesla. It cannot sell a solar panel. It cannot sell anything. And so it really has to be consumer driven, but I don't know how to get consumers to drive it, because they all seem so asleep at the wheel. It's frustrating.
They
honestly.
want convenience. They either want the convenience of the grocery store or they want the low prices of the grocery store. And they don't think that buying your vegetables or my beef is worth it, is a worthwhile investment in their health and in their life. That's fine. Not everybody has to be my customer either.
No, not everybody has to be anybody's customer, but in order for farmers to make the shift, there does have to be an audience. And I think that the direct to consumer beef is taken off, but I do think that the cheap vegetables coming in from Mexico, coming in from other places, and then also just from what I call degenerative farming practices or conventional or even degenerative organic practices. I mean, I look at these fields and fields of cabbages and then fallow and then cilantro and then fallow and then onions. Like it can't be good. It can't, whatever. I mean, I'm not going and stealing their soil and testing it, but it cannot be good to just plow, plant, plow, plant, plow, plant. I know scientifically it can't be good. And so, but it's like people will get all up in arms about the polar bears, about the polar ice caps, and great, but they don't realize 25% of life on the planet lives in the top 10 inches of topsoil. So there literally is not, we are extincting 25% of life on the planet. And people are like, yeah, but it's like they're tiny. Like, they're not, it's not a big deal. But those same people will shut down all of Los Angeles to save a cow from a slaughterhouse. And I'm like, great. Do you want to save a cow from a slaughterhouse? I don't know, stealing a cow from a slaughterhouse. But we can't be
There's
so committed.
660,000 cows that get slaughtered every week. Go ahead, save that one.
I
It'll
know, but
make
it
a
doesn't make
difference.
sense. I mean, people call me, because I'm in the vegan community, people call me all the time and say, there's a cow, blah, blah, blah. Can you go get a trailer and go get it? And I'm always like, no. I have one time I went and got a cow. It was a pregnant cow. Someone found out that it was in the slaughterhouse. The slaughter guy was like, I don't really want to kill this pregnant cow. If you guys come get it, that's fine. So I one time got a cow that was pregnant and brought it to a shelter with my trailer. But ultimately, I don't see why we're like freaking out about one cow in a slaughterhouse when we are plowing the fields every day for our cabbage, killing 25% of life on the planet. We cannot value the cow's life over the microbiology, because the microbiology is literally the foundation of our immune system. There's a 70% overlap by the microbiology in healthy soil and the microbiology in our gut. So if we are not eating food of healthy soil, we are no longer healthy beings, not mentally or physically, because the microbiology has so much to do with your mind. Your gut mind connection is huge. So save the cow, fine, I don't care, but save the microbiology. Like, shift the way we're eating so that microbiology is at the forefront of your choices.
I love it. So let's stay here for a second and explore this a little.
Sure.
So I'm not picking on you when I say vegans, because you're not.
I'm not a vegan anyways. My kids took cups with chocolate this morning out, and they squeeze the milk out right out of the cow and have hot chocolate right out of the cow. So I actually think that some animal protein is necessary. There's literally almost no third generation healthy vegans in the world, or I don't know of any. But if you look in India, there's vegetarians, third, fifth, seventh generation that are totally healthy. But I do believe there's specific things in animal proteins for long-term human health are necessary. And I respect people. I think veganism is a powerful tool for healing. If someone all of a sudden has colon cancer and they want to go to like a vegetable only, no grains, no starch, no whatever, it's a powerful tool for healing. I know lots of people that have healed themselves through veganism. I don't know if it's a forever procreating, being pregnant, all this stuff forever. diet. That's my personal opinion. And I am completely honor my customers and honor their choices. But I do think there's compelling evidence generationally we need some animal protein.
I and I appreciate that. And thank you for saying that. I was more going to come at it from the angle of, you know, a lot of the answer I commonly get when I ask them, why are you vegan? Well, I'm against animal suffering. Like, okay. Well, the question really is now, where do you draw that line of animal suffering? Because that vegan diet that you want to eat requires a certain size area in a certain climate to grow the food that you're going to eat for a year. What animals had to die to create that habitat? How
I mean,
many, what's the habitat loss for deer, for grassland birds, for turkeys, for ants, for beetles, so you could grow that clean field of kale? What's the environmental cost?
it's crazy. And if you saw my farm, it doesn't look like that. There's like everything growing all willy-nilly together. And so I believe in the diversity of a space. And I have a full-time ground squirrel gopher person that's like literally, I mean, he's also the watering guy, but so he's turning on and off sprinklers and setting gopher traps. And I'm going to tell you, I was naive. I came to this farming. I grew up on a farm, but it was, trees. And my parents, had other businesses. So it was, my dad was a carpenter. My mom made clothing, and we had apples and other stone fruit. No, well, apples, not a stone fruit, but apples and stone fruit orchard. But I came to it naively in that no animals would ever die on my farm. I literally thought that I could have a farm and collect the poop and blah, blah, blah. And I naively thought that. And I had been indoctrinated into this vegetarian, vegan Los Angeles mindset. I agree that I was highly misled. And we bought these baby doll sheep to graze in the hops because we have a brewery. We have the only organic hop yard in California. And a neighbor's dog, I got all these special short baby doll sheep that graze in the hops and prune them and had them imported. Not imported, brought from another state, got their whole habitat and everything set up. I'm like, first couple weeks I have the farm, and a neighbor's German Shepherd digs under in nighttime and kills all of my sheep. Every single one of them, 15 dead.
Oh boy.
I come out, he's just sitting in there happy as can be in the morning. They're all dead or bleeding out. My husband had to go get a gun and shoot a couple of them. And I was so like upset. And then my husband's like, this had to happen. I'm glad it happened on week 3, because your little fantasy about no animals dying on the farm is like not reasonable. And he said it was my whiteness, but I think he means my Americanness, not or my Los Angelesness. But he was like, it's not possible. And I said, okay. And we took the sheep. I called the neighbor, and I remember thinking in that moment, every single meal we eat is death, whether we're eating an animal or not. And that is the privilege of being alive. People want to talk about American privilege, white privilege, whatever. The privilege of being alive is that you are eating on the backs of death. And as long as you are present to that and you honor that and you respect the way that you eat, there's nothing wrong with that, because it is the way that God meant it to be. Every bite of food is on the backs of death. There is no food without death. There is zero food without death. It is the privilege of being alive. And we have to honor that we are in the living right at this moment, and our eating is on the backs of death. And if you're a vegan, that is no different. It's just that the dead animal's not on your plate.
And that's the point. That's kind of the point that I was making is and we can even kind of back up a little bit bigger. Like, we as people, as long as we don't have to see it, we can externalize that, and that, well, that's somebody else did that. That's not me. That's not my problem. Or I didn't have to see that, or I'm just going to ignore that part of the system. And I think that applies to a lot of stuff, not just our food system, but our health system, legal system, our government system. We're and with food, we externalize those costs. And people say, oh, well, it's just, well, we've got to use that because corn earworms. Well, what else does it kill beside the corn earworms? Kills off some beetles, some flies, some other stuff. Well, what ate those? I mean, it's
And it just keeps going and going and going. And we have the chance to be the apex species that makes a huge difference or doesn't. And that's why the whole thing of like, climate change, no climate change, that's not a powerful conversation. It's like literally we're the apex species. And are we going to support life living, or are we going to be the bringers of death? That's just like and I don't mean specifically animals dying for food. I just mean the entire ecological system. We get to either support it or degrade it. And that is the question of every moment as a farmer. The people say, what would Jesus do, or what would love do? My question is like, what would life do? Like, how do I provide more life, not less life?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been said before several times that, most conventional guys, they get up in the morning and they're going to go kill something. Whether they know it or not, they're going to go kill something. Whether we're going to hook onto the disc and go disc up the field full of Palmer amaranth, which is great cow feed, by the way, or we're going to load up the sprayer, or we're going to call the spray plane. Like there's a lot of farmers' days that involve death. And as a regenerative rancher, my days that involve death are, they're generally scheduled, trips to the slaughterhouse. And that's always a solemn trip for me. And I'm always thinking of the animal and, what that animal's done for me, and, the respect for it that I have. And it's part of the cycle. And like you said, without death, there's no life. We're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of the same stardust, just arranged in slightly different, unique ways. I mean, from you to me to the deer to the cow to the moose, we're all the same stuff. I mean, even that little dung beetle crawling around, same stuff.
All the same stuff. I agree. And my kids, and my view has shifted since having my own farm and all of this. Like, my kids have watched. I have a neighbor who, does on farm slaughter for his own family. And I've brought all my kids over there to watch it. And people think that's crazy. Why would you want your 3-year-old? Why would you want your 6-year-old to see that? And I always say, does your 3-year-old or 6-year-old eat meat? And they said, yes. And I said, well, then they need to be present to the whole part. My kids are there for cows, sheep being born. They've bottle fed bottle babies. They've lost bottle babies that they were trying so hard to save. I mean, it's part of life. And I have 4 kids. One's still just 3 months old, but the ones that are eating, one of them eats meat and 2 of them have not yet chosen. And I say not yet chosen because they're young and this is their current program. And I think that it's okay for them to make the choice when they're ready and fully aware of what the whole process is. Like, this is the cow, this is the cow's name, this is the cow that they loved and took care of. And that's what sustains our family. That's what sustains, and we talk about it. And I think that it's important. I think it's important on both sides. I think there's a lot of people that eat meat that are very disconnected from the farming process, and that allows them to buy that cheap meat that was in horrific.
Ribeyes are on sale this week.
Yeah, and they're able to get no connection to like what the life of that animal was, and specifically what the end of life what for the animal was in the CAFO kind of consolidated feedlot program. And then I think that there's vegetarians that just think like, okay, well, if I don't eat meat, then that's okay. But then they're eating, GMO soy tofu from the Thai food restaurant and thinking that somehow is better with broccoli from New Zealand. It's not better. And so my thing is all about people being awake and eating in the path towards higher amounts of microbiology. And it shouldn't be so esoteric for people. It should be like really clear, like that top 25% of life on the planet is in the soil, and we need to take care of it the same as we need to take care of the dolphins, like the same.
Yeah. Microbiology.
Yes.
Back to the whole, we're all made of the same stuff, just slightly different ways. We talked about, spraying glyphosate on crops, and whether it's corn or whatever sprayed on wheat, and then it's, processed and bleached and then enriched. Where's all that stuff come from? And we're going to put that in our body. And Gail Fuller asked this question often about, is glyphosate residue in our food? Is that harming human biology? And my doctor, who I've also had on the podcast, he told me that like blood tests show that over 90% of Americans have glyphosate in their urine and in their blood. Like, guys, this is a problem. And then, the chemical manufacturers, of course, they're getting sued because people are getting cancer from spraying this stuff. And they're saying, oh, no, well, it doesn't build up in the human body. That's not a big deal. Hold on. It's like they're lying to us out of both sides of their mouth, saying that it's not that bad, but we only need a couple drops of it to clear your whole field. Like, this is processes that are in plants. I mean, there's processes in plants that are in us. And the biology is the same. Glyphosate, Roundup, it's an antibiotic agent. I mean, it kills bacteria, it kills life.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, so their claim is that it doesn't do any harm to the human body. So the skin bag that is holding your soul, it doesn't do damage to that. But you're only 50% that, and you're 50% bacteria, viruses, fungi, all this other microbiology that's living in you. And that is highly damaged by it. And so you cannot live, a man is not an island. You cannot live a sterile life. You actually need that microbiology. Like, watch a chicken take a bath, watch a horse take a bath. They do it in dirt. Like, they are replenishing that onto their bodies. And so we think it's not doing anything to the physical body. And I'm not positive that that's a true claim. But let's give them that claim. It doesn't matter, because it is damaging everything that holds our immune system together, holds our gut from leaking, holds all of these things together. And so the idea that it doesn't damage our body is kind of irrelevant, because we do know that it's damaging everything that has a shikimate pathway, which is like all of our microbiology.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned the name of the pathway, the shikimate pathway. So from what I understand, the shikimate pathway is an essential mechanism that binds zinc to the cells. And zinc is one of the elements that's very critical for immune system function. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, it is my understanding. It binds almost any nutrient. It stops at being able to uptake nutrients. So imagine that's what's killed. Like, it stops uptake of nutrients. So if you stop the microbiology in your body from uptaking nutrients, zinc being one of the most important ones, you're stopping yourself. And then we have obesity with all these things, because people are not getting they're not getting what they need. So they continue to feel hungry, because their brain is going to continue to tell them something is missing.
I think I think we have an obesity problem in our society because of ultra processed grains, starches, high fructose corn, and sugar in everything.
100%. But it's also, there's no nutrient density. So our body continues to tell people that they're hungry because they're not getting the nutrients and micronutrients that are necessary. Our bodies are divine and perfect, and they continue to store fat for a later day because that is what we were designed to do. If we came across a beehive when we were hunters and gatherers, and we were able to eat a bunch of honey and we couldn't use all that sugar that day, we stored it for another day. Our body is still doing that for us. And our body is often in a state of fight or flight. So we're storing for later. We're in fear. We're in this, and then we're eating highly processed white foods nonstop. And yes, there's sugar in tomato sauce. Like, I'm a chef. I never put sugar in tomato sauce in the restaurant. Like, I mean, maybe a little white wine cooked down so that there's a little sugar, but I don't put sugar in a tomato sauce. But if you go to the store, organic or not, every fucking tomato sauce on the shelf has sugar in it. Why? We don't need it. It's in everything. And when we went to this low fat craze of the 90s, we started putting sugar in everything to make up for the fat. Like, that's also a whole big bullshit. Like, the fat is necessary and good fats are necessary. And when we only ate tallow and butter and lard, people were much skinnier. And the reality is, and I think olive oil in its raw form is also good for you. I think there's a few other oils that are good for you in their raw form. But I think that the highly processed seed oils are completely undigestible and are causing inflammation in so many different ways. And I just think we are completely immune to even, we see cottonseed oil in something, like, why are we eating that? It's not even a food.
Most of those oils, a lot of those seed oils, canola oil,
Uh-huh. The
uh,
rapeseed. I always say, oh, you like rapeseed oil? I didn't know that.
uh, canola or rapeseed, and what was the other one we were just talking about? I mean, corn oil doesn't need to be cleaned, but there's another one I was just thinking of that. Anyway, they have to like remove the toxins from the oil because it's like as pressed from the seed. If you take that oil and try to use it, it would kill you because it's got toxins in it. It's got compounds in it that prevent that thing from being eaten at that time. So we have to remove those compounds in order to make it safe. Like you talked earlier about margarine turning into a lump of plastic. Well, I mean, they had to add flavoring to make margarine taste like something. It was originally developed as an industrial lubricant, not as a food.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we think about these things like they're not even approved. There's so many stuff like that we're like not even approved for what we're using them for. I mean, what was Roundup originally approved for? It was approved as an antibiotic, and then it was approved as a drain cleaner, and then they cleaned a drain and it went out to a pond and it killed everything in the pond. And they were like, oh my God, this is the best weed killer ever. And now it's on all of our food and we're feeding it to babies. It's insanity. And we look at this. I was just trying to look into this appeal because people keep emailing me, do you use appeal? And I do not. I don't use anything but water to clean our vegetables. We're crazy over here, just cleaning with water. But
Just insane.
insane. So we wanted to look into, I was looking into it, and like the patent, it only says citric acid 1% or 2%. And then, well, what's the other 98%? I don't know what it is. It doesn't say, it doesn't list it. And so, and it's certified organic. And I'm just wondering, like, what is this coating they're putting on all these apples and stuff that's certified organic, but nobody can see the ingredients. And it was originally, it's like an input. I think it's either a fertilizer or a fungicide. It wasn't even, it's not even the patent is not to cover food with it.
Great moments and unintended consequences. That,
Yeah.
that's just what popped into my head. You know, thinking about, we're the same age. We grew up I mean, obviously in different places, but at the same time. And through the 90s and early 2000s, non-stick skillets. Everybody wants to buy non-stick skillets, and if you use cast iron, or you're just, you're a Luddite if you use cast iron. You're nuts.
My mom wouldn't let us have nonstick nothing.
Well, good for her. But now that all this stuff's come out in the last few years about PFOAs and PFAS, guys, that's Teflon. Like that's those are literally the byproducts from Teflon, and that's the crap that comes off of Teflon into your food. That's what that is. Um, I look at
And
that and go, well, yeah, Teflon's pretty cool. It's a really neat substance, but apparently it never, ever, ever breaks down, and it will be here forever. And I don't know if anybody, I don't know if you, I don't know if everybody knows this, but when you put something man-made in nature, it only gets smaller. And microplastics, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Microplastics and forever chemicals. And it circles back to, we were talking earlier about plastic packaging and styrofoam trays. They're
yeah,
great for convenience. They're great for keeping crap off of food. Nobody's going to deny that. But like the point I made earlier, like there's a lot of energy involved in making that plastic. There's oil involved in making that plastic, and we're just going to throw it away. And not only that, the chances are the food that's wrapped around used a ridiculous amount of oil in the form of diesel fuel to make, to till the field, fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, harvesting it. And then they're going to complain that it's $2 for 4 years of corn. Like, you should be rejoicing that it's that cheap.
I have to tell you this short little story. We used to sell food at Coachella, which is a big music festival in Southern California. We had 6 or 7 booths. It was a big operation every year. Basically, go down there for a month because there's Stagecoach happens right after Coachella, so you sell food through the whole thing. And this woman and this is some years ago, is screaming at me because she paid $15 for these nachos, and how I'm putting a vegan tax and I'm taking advantage, and I'm literally got a baby strapped to me. I'm in the middle of the desert. I'm living in an RV. It's like 100 and something degrees. And I just look at this woman and I'm like, that's a fucking miracle. That's what that is. You're mad? That is organic tortilla corn grown in Mexico, imported here, pressed into tortillas in Los Angeles, fried right here in my food truck in the desert into homemade chips. That is cabbage grown in Ventura County. I can tell you the name of the farmer. Her name is Ayala. And that is jalapenos from Ayala as well. That is beans that were imported from Mexico as well, certified organic. And then on top of that, you have cashew nacho cheese. The nachos came from India. Women's fingers are black and burned off from cleaning those raw cashews because the cashew is toxic to be opened when it's not been cooked yet. And all of that has been put into a plate in a little boat and sold to you for $15 in the VIP section, where it cost you $450 to have this ticket or whatever it was at that time, probably more. That's a fucking miracle. That is not a ripoff. And you don't even deserve to have it. I'm going to give you back your $15. And I took her food from her. She just stared at me like, and I gave her $15.
That's awesome. I would have loved to have had that on video.
I mean, it's just people have no concept of what it took to get anything, to do anything. Honestly,
We've had it too easy for too long.
Yes, nobody knows how to do anything in the brick and mortar physical world. When I tell people I'm moving to Texas, they're like, "Ooh, you're okay with the politics?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm moving because of the politics." And they're like, "Oh, oh." Sure. They can't like reconcile it because they're like, don't know what to say, because they're like, oh, she's an organic farmer and a vegan chef and like whatever they made up about themselves, what they think I am. but and then they start to talk to me, well, why? And I start to explain about my businesses and the bureaucracy and everything. And they're like, oh, well, I guess as a movie editor, I never had to think about that. Oh, I guess as a content creator, I never had to think about that. I guess as a yoga instructor, I never had to think about. The thing is 90% of people's jobs nowadays, they don't have to do anything physical in the real world. They do not have to bring anything into fruition from an idea into shape, form, and experience. And without doing that in the real world, you actually have no idea how hard it is to maneuver and how the government is trying intentionally to make it harder for us to maneuver so that they can have the largest market share, or the BlackRock arm of the government can have the bigger market share.
I'd argue that 90% of all jobs are BS.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't describe your job to a 5-year-old in 3 words or less, you probably have a bullshit job.
I agree. But I had to plug in my computer. Sorry. I agree. I agree. And most people don't do anything. Like my kids go every day and pick up eggs. Those eggs get washed and get sold to the farmer's market. And I always tell my kids, this is more than a lot of adults have to do in the real world. and that's like silly, but yeah, it takes an hour. They got to go. The chicken houses are all, around because they get moved, and they got to go and they got to collect them all up. And it's important for them to know. My kids save seeds, my kids make clones, my kids do all these things because I think it's important to know how to do stuff. We might be that last generation. I can sew, I can crochet, I can cross stitch, I can food, I can cook food, I can preserve food, I can dry food, I can braid garlic, like the basic shit that everyone knew how to do 100 years ago. We might be the last generation that knows how to do it.
That's kind of scary.
Do you know how many times someone has called me from one of my restaurants and said they had called a something, and it's like the breaker? They called a plumber, they called it this, they called it, and it's like the breaker was off. Like I'm like, or I'll go in and they'll say the air conditioning's broken, and I'll look and they have it set at 68 degrees and it's 100 outside and they've frozen it, and I am say, well, you got to turn it off, put it on fan only, and let it de-thaw. And they're like, well, you want to call the air conditioning guy? No, I don't need to call the air conditioning guy. You can't have there be a 40-degree differential from what it is outside to what you set the air conditioning at, because it'll never reach temperature. It'll never turn off. These are simple facts of life. We shouldn't have to call an air conditioner guy for that. But these are like the upper management. These are people getting paid $100,000+ a year that don't know to check the breaker.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was my job. Nobody told me that.
I was walking in Echo Park, which is where one of my restaurants is, on Tuesday, and these 2 girls were walking, and I was changing a diaper in my car, and they were talking behind me, and I could hear their conversation. And the one girl said, if she texts me again when I'm not on the clock, I'm going to let her know it is totally inappropriate to infringe on my personal time. And I just laughed. Like, I thought, nobody ever got successful by working 8 hours a day and not contributing to your job if someone needs a question when you're off the clock. Like, nobody ever got successful that way. I worked for 7 years with no days off. I don't recommend it, but I own restaurants and I'm a farmer. Like, I work in the 2 hardest industries in the world in some ways, and there's no days off, and you're 100% in it. And so when I look at these people who are like, oh, well, you texted after 5 p.m., I'm like, yeah, the restaurant's open till midnight, and you moved something and I need to know where it was. Like, what do you mean? Yes, I did. Someone got injured. I have to like say to my assistant when I hire them, like, there's going to be text messages on weekends or after 5 p.m. because if someone gets injured, we may have to file a workers' comp claim. OSHA only gives us 8 hours to You have to tell them that, because otherwise you get someone that says you can't text them after 5 p.m. or it's violence against their free time.
Okay. I'm not going to text my banker after 5 o'clock and ask about any bank business.
No, that's reasonable. But if you work at a restaurant that's
That's
open
open.
till midnight,
Yeah. I mean, you handle stuff while business is going on. I mean, I totally get that. Anybody I do cow business with, like 9 o'clock is generally the cutoff, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Those are generally quiet hours. After that, if your eyes are open in agriculture, you better be ready to do business because somebody can call you 2 seconds before you go to bed and want to talk about something and give you, a $10,000 or $100,000 opportunity. And, likewise, just because it's not, technically work hours, when the sheriff's dispatch calls, I can't just say, well, I don't clock in till 8, so I'm not going to, I'll call them back. No, they're calling me because there's something wrong. Usually neighbors' cows out. Every once in a while, it's one of mine, but you know how that goes.
I do.
So, I mean, there's times, there's people in the world that need to have a work-life boundary. And yeah, okay, if you're an advertise, and there's probably a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be handled after hours. Like if you work at McDonald's and your boss is texting you after hours, yeah, ignore that guy. You should probably find a new job anyway. But what I'm getting at is, yeah, people have different schedules, and those two chicks having that conversation, they're probably in that 90% of people that have a bullshit job that doesn't matter.
Yeah. But I can't have a job that doesn't matter. My husband talks to me about this a lot. He says there's a lot easier ways for us to make a living. There's a lot easier ways that we could make much more money. And you want to be this best cell in the body of the earth. And that makes life harder on us. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's true. I can't be inspired about selling. I mean, I don't know, having a corner store and selling food filled with Roundup and corn syrup and selling, you know, calling cards or whatever. Like I can't feel inspired about that.
I understand. I mean, okay, so you've got 4 kids. Is that counting your oldest that's adopted?
No, five
Okay,
with
so you
him.
have five.
Yes.
You have 5 kids, 3 farms. You're moving to Texas, and you have 4 restaurants.
Yes.
Do you have any free time?
I sleep 6 hours a night.
Oh, I shouldn't say free time. Do you have any recreational time?
We try to incorporate recreation into our lives, but um, my kids are getting older now, and it's getting to that we have to schedule time. Like I just took 4 days and took them to be with all their cousins um, and we sat around the pool and I worked limited hours and let them just play with the cousins and everything like that. And we try to, my daughter's riding horses every day, so we try to go do that in the afternoon and everybody watches her. But my recreation time is more like being a mother, I guess.
Well, and that kind of leads into what I was going to say next anyway. Um, so my wife's family has a pizza restaurant, been open over 30 years. I mean, it's
Congratulations.
it's a pretty good place. And I've heard her say it probably at least once a month for the last 10 years that owning a restaurant is like having a child that never grows up. So you not only have 4 kids under 8, you have 4 restaurants and 3 farms. It's just like 12 kids.
It's and yeah, and it's super challenging. But I'm hoping to find someone to take over this farm in California and buy it and continue what we've done. It would be a travesty to have someone just tear it all up and plant lemons and spray Roundup every day. But I can't be spread this thin. And we are shifting our business model in 2 of our restaurants to go only. Because we're doing almost
Dining
2
room
million.
space is a lot of overhead.
Yeah, it's 5,000 square foot and all this overhead, and we're still doing $2 million in to-go sales, and then we're paying 30% to those third parties. So we've modeled 2 of them to go from the in-person to like a cloud kitchen model where there's no actual restaurant that you can go sit at, but you can get it delivered. I don't love that, but I also, I don't know what else to do. The land, it came to leases being up and landlords and all that stuff. And so, so I hope to move to Texas and do this on farm where the whole business is on farm. And I hope to, transition out of my California restaurants and let the CEO take it over. Hopefully, we're not there yet. And then have a business that's fully on farm, restaurant, brewery, CSA, micro dairy, all on the 300 to 250 acres in Texas.
Well, you've talked about California a little bit, and I've gathered from some clues you're not far from LA. You're in Southern California. So maybe tell me a little bit about where you're at in California and tell me where you're going in Texas. And you're talking about pecan trees and 320 acres. I'm going to guess that you're east of 35 and south of 40.
No, sort of, I guess. I'm
A
west of,
runs,
I'm
35 is north south through Dallas, and 40 is east west through Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, 40 is in Oklahoma. What's the one in Dallas? 10?
So I'm just above San Antonio in between Bandera and Kerrville.
Okay.
So I'm kind of southwest of Austin and northwest of San Antonio.
Okay.
And it's like beautiful fields, river bottom fields with super deep topsoil that has been just kind of neglected and overraised. But I mean, it's a lot of topsoil. Nothing like here in California. I mean, it's like 6-7 feet. You can look at the side of the creek bed of the topsoil, which is, we have nothing like that here. But it's highly alkaline soil. And then, there's several 100 acres of cedars. So I have like about 100 acres of perfect pastures, flat as can be. And then there's cedars on either side, like 100 acres and it's this whole valley. And then there's a lot of places on the cedar area that can be silvo pastures. We're working on clearing and like lollipopping up the cedars and making these silvo pastures. And then we're setting up in the thick cedars where it's too hard to even get in there. I'm trying to set up 12 pig paddocks so we can start moving pigs through and clearing out the cedar that way. And then going in there. So there's a fair amount of perfect ag land that's already there that they've just used for grazing cattle and hay, and then which we're working on regenerating. And we have a summer cover crop in there now that's struggling with the heat. And we've been adding manure, adding cedar chips, and then we're also got about 10 greenhouses going, and we'll be doing vegetables under glass but under plastic, and then we have about 15 acres of orchard that we've just planted, very experimental, 20 of this, 20 of that to see what's going to go. People aren't really farming anything except for cattle and sheep in this area, so doing a more diverse farm is going to be different for the area. And we've been having good success on what we're trying, but I don't really have the labor force over there yet, and my attention is distracted, so we're not fully functioning. And then we're building an event space for retreats and stuff, and then I've already purchased all the brewery equipment, and we're putting in a brewery there. It's going to be called Wild Texas Brewing or In the Barn Brewing. Which one do you guys like better? You can let him know. And that's what we're doing in Texas. And then in California, we're along the Sespe Creek, which the Sespe Creek is the last undammed river in Southern California. And so the last undammed river in Southern California, and it stayed live even though we only had 2 inches of rain 2 years in a row, less than 3 inches of rain 2 years in a row. It continued to be live water. And my neighbor, Mr. King, who used to own this house, says that in his 87 years, it's or 90, he's turning 90 this year. 90 years it's never gone dry. And so that is it's a beautiful place. It's the most water rich valley in Southern California. But it's also in the crazy bureaucracy of
But it's also in Southern California.
also in Southern California. I mean, it's epically beautiful. I Kiss the Ground just put out a film about what we did in 5 years here. If people want to watch it, it's stories of regeneration on there. It's only 11 minutes, so it's not a big commitment. But you can see, I mean, it's just every inch is covered from citrus, 100, we have 40 varieties of avocados and 30 varieties of citrus, and just epic biodiversity and massive amounts of food. And but it's really been a struggle to make it all work.
Well, I'm excited to hear back from you after you get moved down to Texas and follow up on your experiments, because everything's experimental. Some of the things you're saying about cedar trees are very interesting. My preferred strategy to deal with them is to light them on fire and then grind them to dust, and then light what's left on fire and then grind that to dust. And I've had pretty good results. I kind of feel like the only good cedar tree is one that's been horizontally redistributed in the form of mulch. That being said, only about 1 in 10 to 1 in 7 Eastern red cedar trees. I don't know if you're referring to a different type, because I know they have some different types down there around San Antonio. But the Eastern red cedar tree, Virginia's junipers, only about 1 in 7 to 1 in 10 are a female and have berries. So if you want to keep some trees, don't keep those, because those are seed source for the rest of them. And if you want everybody with allergies to thank you later, you'll cut down the males too, because cedar pollen, when those things blow up, here it usually happens between the 10th and 15th of March. When they blow up, I mean, it's just like this huge cloud of brown blowing off these trees. And that pollen, it's like little razor blades. You can just feel it tearing up your eyes and tearing up your nose. So I also understand the alkalinity in the soil. I understand where you're coming from. I'm just saying that my experience with cedar trees, I'd much rather not have them at all. I wouldn't mind seeing them just go away completely. But I also do recognize that they did have a historical niche in the ecosystem. And there were places that cedar trees have probably been and could have been existing in those areas since the last ice age, just because of where they are. And I say that because we had a wildfire come through here in 2016, 340 some thousand acres. On the day that it burned across the ranch, it was 85 degrees with about 10% humidity and 45-mile-an-hour wind. If that fire didn't get those trees, and 8 prescribed fires over the last 30 years didn't get those trees, there's probably not a whole lot that's going to burn those trees up. So
I mean, we have some that are, I had the guy from Bamberger Ranch come down and give us some advice about what cedars to take you out and because he's had a lot of success with that. And he said there's some of them that he was saying are 300 to 400 years we have been there that we have. I mean, they're huge cedar trees. And then we have a ton of that's old, not old growth. So I want to try to get out all the young and open up the canopy so that these little sprinkles of water actually reach the ground, because there's lots of splashes of water, not torrential downpours, that don't ever make it to the ground. They hit the top, the closed canopy of the cedar, and then they evaporate off. And so my goal is to open up that canopy and have more water hit the ground, more water going into the aquifers, and then grind it all up, turning it into mulch and helping the mulch making material to acidify the soil.
all the mulching and grinding that I did, there were places that I left the mulch layer just right on the ground, and I didn't really disturb the ground or disturb the grass that was there, and I just left it. There were other places where I had a super deep layer. Like there was one place I had almost 18 inches deep of mulch, and I'm like, oh man, I can't leave it like this. So I ended up just taking the tool and going back through it several more times and getting it really, really churned up and really chopped up finer. And what I ended up doing was incorporating some soil into that. I went back to that spot literally 9 months later, like halfway, like I did that in the winter and came back the middle of next summer. Couldn't even see the mulch. It was 5, 6 foot tall, big blue stem and Indian grass. Just incredible. Everywhere that I took that I took cedars and ground them to dust and incorporated soil into that mulch and spread it around, it looks amazing. The places where I just mulched it and left the mulch letting standing on the ground, not as great. The places that were mulched, left on the ground, and then burned, still not as great. So definitely incorporating some of the soil into your mulch pile and getting that biology jump started, I think is really important. So that's
I agree. I totally agree. And we've been doing some different experiments with that. And also just piling the mulch and then adding the cow, cleaning the cow stalls and adding the whey when we're making cheese to like up the microbiology and then putting it out after it's been sat for with some soil, with some cow to get it like jump started before we spread it around. And I mean, we've had epic results with mulch in Southern California here. I mean, you can't, we had no soil here. Like literally it was just rocks and everything else had blown away. And we just kept mulching, and then kept adding material from the cows. And within just the 5 years that we've been here, we have so much. And we did do all the orchard rows when the trees were young, 18 inches of straight mulch for weed as the weed barrier, and then just cleared a space around each tree so they didn't burn. And that's gone. It's absolutely gone. In places that were not growing food, unfortunately, what is the grass that I hate that people grow all over Texas? Bermuda grass is invasive and has come in all over. But honestly, I'm not that mad at the Bermuda grass in an orchard system because it's building carbon, it has spongy soil, and it can take away that. Sorry about that. It can take away that mulch and make it into nothing in almost no time at all. And that is the one benefit of Bermuda grass is it can destroy mulch and turn it into soil, but you'll never get rid of the Bermuda grass. But in a tree system, it doesn't matter.
well, I was just thinking back, like I said when we started, I just finished listening to 1491,
Yeah.
and oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say. Something about unintended consequences. Yeah, yeah. Wow, I completely went blank on that one.
Well, I'm excited to grow some blue stem. We just ordered some seeds. There's nothing there's none that I can find on our property now. But we did just order some seeds and I'm excited to try it out and to get some other natives going because yeah, people just put Bermuda grass all around in that area for hay.
I remember what I was going to say.
Yes.
So, what's the difference between an archaeologist and a grave robber?
The timing.
What's the difference between a native species and an invasive species?
The timing.
There you go. So, okay, I mean that's one viewpoint, right? That's one viewpoint, and we're living in an environment, and this kind of really became clear over the last few days listening to this book. Like, the America that we think that we discovered something that was changing so rapidly because of events that were set in place in 1491 and 1492. Like, and those changes were still being felt, all the way up to when the frontier was settled in the 1880s and 1890s. And 500 years of rapid population decrease, rapid population increase, in some things. Like one of the things they talk about in that book is the passenger pigeon. Folks used to say that, the passenger pigeon used to like a flock used to take 2 days to pass. Well, the stuff that they eat, the Indians would have kept them under control. I get was the point the book was making. The Indians would have kept them under control. And the same thing with the bison. I've said this for quite a while now, that the depopulation of the Native Americans and their reliance on bison and using bison for hunting and as a source of food, when in the span of just a couple hundred, when maybe 50 to 100 years, 90% of your people aren't there anymore. Those populations that were dependent on humans for control, like the passenger pigeon, like the bison, would explode out of control. And by the time us Europeans, us New Worlders, us Americans get here, and we see these huge flocks of passenger pigeons, we think they must have always existed. Similarly, we discover someplace and we think that it must have always been this way. But nothing in nature is ever the same. Things in nature change on such a long scale that we have to be there for years and years and years to observe it and document it. And even animals, an animal population can change. We used to think the passenger pigeon was so huge in numbers that nobody could ever imagine them not being there one day. And then all of a sudden, they were just gone. So I'm not sure where I'm going anymore. I'm just kind of rambling. But I think.
But to the point is that Bermuda grass is invasive, but at some point it's actually just going to be an indigenous species to this area, that the middle of the country and also in California, because it's really good at living in this environment.
Really good at living in the environment where you created. But, the point is, like, here a lot of people deal with a plant called Old World Bluestem, which I could probably talk about 2 hours for Old World Bluestem. Is it a concern of mine? Yes. Is it spreading across the ranch? Yes. Have I tried in the past to manage it with chemical? Yes. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like I wish I had the money back that I've sprayed on that stuff, because it didn't do anything. I mean, you spray it to dirt for 3 years in a row and bare soil, and then it comes back thicker than it was before you started spraying it, because everything else because you have to spray so much, either, ground sterilant, whether you want to use, what the hell was it that I used? I didn't use Roundup. I used something else. Arsenal, I think is what it was. It's just total ground sterilant. Well, after you do that, the only thing that grew there was Old World Bluestem. Huh. And I don't believe that invasive species being successful, like, I've heard some people in the regenerative ag or holistic ag community say that, well, that's just a sign of poor health. Make your soil better and those will go away. No, I don't think my native big bluestem is going to compete with the grass that was bred in a laboratory to succeed in hot, dry conditions. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So
No.
The point is, we need to learn how to utilize those resources in the environment that they're in, rather than trying to spend untold amounts of time, money, and chemicals to try to get rid of them.
I 100% agree. And I spent a lot of money. I didn't use chemicals, but labor in trying to get rid of the Bermuda grass. But then we feed Bermuda grass to our animals. And so there's no way to get rid of it. It's in our compost. It's everywhere. And what I realized is that we just have to keep it at bay where we're growing vegetables, but in the aisleways underneath the trees, that's not where we're growing vegetables. I mean, it goes dormant in the wintertime here in California. And so you have all that time to use those aisleways that have a lot of that. You can grow cabbage, broccoli, whatever in the wintertime because it's dormant. And then in the summertime, it literally works as a cooling for all those trees because it's this much grass underneath these trees that are, I mean, we're at the edge of where we should be growing avocados. We're at the edge of where we should be growing a lot of things we're growing. And the heat is a concern. And so I now have this grass that doesn't die in the heat, it's just like epically and is so resilient. You put weed barrier, I mean, weed barrier anywhere and put just straight mulch on top of it. The Bermuda grass will grow over the weed barrier, turn that mulch into soil, and the microbiology is passing through the weed barrier. So it's like, forget about it. Forget about trying to get rid of it. It's just about managing where you're going to use it and then let it build soil. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but in January, we had major flooding here in Southern California, major flooding on the farm here. I guess I was on the news even in Europe. Someone said they saw me there. But I mean, 18 inches of water running across the farm. Everywhere that we had Bermuda grass was fine. There was zero erosion. The trees did not get teared out. Everything was okay. Yes, I mean, the Bermuda grass was flat from the water running over it, but that's it. But anywhere that there was bare soil, the roads, all of the roads were just rocks, like this much, just rocks, and all the dirt had washed away. We lost whole strawberry beds, the whole greenhouse filled with this much silt. But the silt literally just ran over the Bermuda grass, ran over it and went down and then got caught in a fence or something. But it didn't destroy. And then I look at my neighbor, he lost tons of avocado trees because their feet got so wet, so like stagnant water on top that couldn't infiltrate. I didn't lose a single avocado tree to wet feet. We had a lot of damage, but it was fencing, irrigation, and we lost about 100 chickens that got buried in the silt. But we didn't lose any trees. And I think it's because the Bermuda grass had the water infiltrate better, to be honest.
Or at least held the soil in place
And
so it didn't leave. And what I'm seeing in my mind is, I'm just seeing the grass laid over as a protective mat to keep the water from eroding the soil. And as soon as it's gone, that grass just springs right back up. And yeah, you're right. There is some of it that's going to be soaking in, but when it's 18 inches deep and basically a river running through, when I see that, I assume the underlying soil is already pretty much at saturation capacity or is already at max infiltration. And this is just the excess that's got to go somewhere else.
But you could look around and we had damage, but it was all in the culverts. It was all, our fields are fine. And it was only where we had like rows of kale or something like that just got washed away. But anywhere that there was, and in the hop yard, we have like a compilation cover crop of a native Southwest blend that's very matty. And what happened there is a lot of silt got deposited on top of it, and you could almost not see it, but it all has now come up through the hop yard and come up. And also the hops are all, we're actually going to start hop harvest this week, which is very early. And then there's some hops that are not even going to be ready. We're going to have kind of a segmented hop harvest because so much silt buried them. They all emerged through the silt at different times. But if you dig up the soil in the hop yard, you'll see there's like 4 or 5 inches of this new silt. And then there's our black normal soil that we built, and then rock down below. It's like a new layer in the conversation. And so anywhere we had cover crops, whether it was the Bermuda grass or this other blend or whatever, there wasn't damage. And that's like the real testament.
Very cool. Well, I've really enjoyed visiting with you today. I know there's several people that I know down around San Antonio. A couple of them I've had on the podcast. Hopefully they'll reach out and connect with you and welcome you to the area when you get down there. I'd love to come down and see it. You'll see, 25, 30 tiny houses on a communal farm. That sounds awesome. I'd love to get down there and see it. So before we go, why don't you tell us how people can get a hold of you, where they can find you on social media, and anywhere else you want to drive some traffic to?
Yeah, so I'm Chef Mollie on Instagram, and my farm in Texas is Sovereignty Ranch on Instagram, and my farm in California is Sow a Heart, like to plant a seed of love. So sow a heart. And if anybody were doing a big raise right now for the brewery and the tiny house village, like you spoke about. So if anybody's interested in investing, there's that on the website there. And please reach out with any questions. And I look forward to being in Texas. And hopefully I will meet more farmers there doing totally different things. And we can share knowledge, because that's really what it's all about.
For sure. And did you say what your website was, or did I miss it?
It's sowaheart.com or sovereigntyranch.com or sageveganbistro.com.
Okay.
I have to go. I'm late to this next conference call, and I'm getting poked from people outside via the digital world.
Well, I wasn't trying to kick you off, but I guess you do have to go. So
I'm so sorry. I apologize. I don't want to get kicked off. I so enjoyed visiting with you, and I look forward for you coming to check out everything in Texas. And I'm hoping we can do different conferences with several regenerative farmers and different kinds of gatherings to share knowledge once we have all the tiny houses set up and the retreat center and the classrooms, because I think it is powerful for everybody to share the knowledge. We are, doing this Kiss the Ground cotton and helping these Texas farmers transition to regenerative cotton, and Citizens for Humanity has agreed to buy all the cotton. And it's just really moving to see these farmers sharing information with each other, what they're seeing in their soil and everything. And so I think it's important for us to gather and share that information.
You'll love the West. You'll love it once you get out of California.
I hope so.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'll let you get to your next meeting, Mollie. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And gang, have a great week.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review if you haven't already. And don't forget to check out the Q&A and the polls on Spotify. Your support helps us bring more enlightening conversations and fresh stories from the world of farming and ranching. Thank you for listening to Ranching Reboot, your favorite regenerative ag podcast.